Hello, hi, good evening. Today on Sri Lanka Developer Forum, we have Gapstars. Gapstars is like presenting a developer today on security of implementation on JavaScript frameworks. And we have Zara here. Zara will take it off the stage and she will introduce their developer and we can go it from there. Over to you, Zara. We have Zara here. Zara will take it off the.
Thank you, Fikri, and very good evening to everyone who has joined us in today. So I'll be happy to introduce you to our speaker, and our speaker is Sadat Iqbal, who is an engineer. He is an engineer here at OnRamper, which is one of the clients here at Capstars. So OnRamper is a leading fiat to crypto payments provider based in the Netherlands. So, a little bit about Sadat. Sadat is a certified cybersecurity professional with MIT's Cybersecurity Initiative and a member of the Oxford Blockchain Society as well. He is an alumnus of Kellogg's College, University of Oxford, and he has over 15 years' experience in the software outsourcing industry and 10 years helping startups to grow their new business ventures. So today's session is going to be on security implications on JavaScript frameworks. And what we're going to be doing today is we will be discussing JavaScript, TypeScript, and security considerations when developing web applications and services. We will also be running through common security hazards and language features that will help you to develop a more secure application. So that's a little bit about what you will be expecting today and a little bit about our presenter Sadat as well. So without wasting any further time, Sadat, the floor is yours and I hope that everyone enjoys today's session.
Thank you, Zara. So let me just quickly share my slides here. So, Zara, I think my slide should be up there. Correct. Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining in, and it's great to have this opportunity to speak to you about security implications of JavaScript frameworks. Because it's a very relevant topic these days. JavaScript has taken off exponentially. JavaScript and its sibling TypeScript. And not only is it now in the front end, but more importantly, it has now come to the back end through Node.js and various other platforms, and is running some very important backend systems for many ventures. Now, when we think of security implications here, there are the usual suspects that keep coming up. So if you look at a list of them, here they are. So you've probably seen many of these before. Many of them are over 20, 25 years old, some of them as old as JavaScript itself. Probably not the NoSQL injection, but the rest of them. So these exploits, there's nothing new here. Many of you all must be familiar with these. Otherwise, Google will help you, figure out what these are. But this particular collection of exploits are very old. We've seen them before. Then they keep coming over and over again. Throughout the years, even though that we have got very sophisticated. These are inherent to the web and inherent to the way we function on the internet. So browsers are forgiving. We want languages to be forgiving as well. And this is where vulnerabilities begin to creep in and places we need to take care of. This is not getting any better in frameworks. So if you look at this next slide, this is from Snag, which is a security watchdog for the JavaScript ecosystem. And as you can see, the bar all the way at the in the right is NPM. NPM is the Node.js package manager and is probably the most popular package manager for JavaScript software, and for JavaScript in general, really. And compared to all of those other frameworks, you can see that Node is a huge offender when it comes to security vulnerabilities. Now, is this actually a problem with Node? Or the JavaScript ecosystem or the way it is run? Not really, because JavaScript and npm are targeted towards composable software. So they need to be this open, and they need to have this many packages to be able to run this kind of operation. So what can be done about this? Can we go ahead and sanitize these frameworks? Can we do security fixes? Well, you can see the graph on the right there shows how the package ecosystem has been growing over the years. And once again, NPM, which is the yellow bar up there, is pretty large compared to the rest of them, which goes to show how many packages are coming per year. So security auditing this kind of volume and this many packages is not easy. So vulnerabilities within the JavaScript ecosystem is something that developers have to make peace with and learn to live with. Otherwise, we can't be using JavaScript. Do I think this is ever going to go away? Not really. So, what's the solution to this? Okay, so frameworks are vulnerable. They're showing a lot of vulnerabilities throughout the years. Is this a solution here? Don't use any frameworks or libraries. Every team has a Puritan on board, and this guy will tell you, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's check everything out. While you're at it, let's just open Notepad and start coding that way." Not a really good idea, because first of all, your time to market is going to suffer. So that is what these frameworks help you with. They provide you ready-made functionality so that you can concentrate on your own core business. If you get rid of them, you probably won't have a business really in this day and age where you have to get it to market very, very quickly, and the people using these frameworks will beat you to it. This is also not a solution in the security perspective as well, because if you look at where we're coming from an absolute disaster. So before, frameworks were very popular with JavaScript, or for that matter, any kind of software ecosystem. Security was terrible. Uh, Main offender was the bad authentication and authorization practices that have been going on. If you look at some of the old systems, many of them are extremely vulnerable with bad implementations of security here. Uh, you may even come across a large number of systems where you can, just do some URL manipulation and skip the login screen as well. Okay, so these kinds of things have been going on, and this is what frameworks were brought in to solve. And they've done that for the large part. Authentication and authorization now goes to the framework. So that is a pretty certain piece of software there. Common validations are handled also through your framework. You're spared, that bit of work there. So framework is actually part and parcel of your security. And uh, I was one of the team leads was telling everybody some time back, hey, use frameworks; it'll keep you safe. And we still stand by that kind of suggestion because um, it does keep you safe. But nonetheless, they too have vulnerabilities coming in. And one difference between the vulnerabilities of these frameworks and vulnerabilities introduced by you would be that the framework is out of your control. You cannot apply fixes to the framework from your development team. So in that way, although the vulnerabilities your software has got has reduced, you are now having vulnerabilities that are pretty difficult to attend to, and probably you need to wait for another developer to do. So as developer, what are you going to do? What is a good method for developers who are not cybersecurity professionals, running sensitive businesses, probably startups, probably small businesses? How are you going to manage your security and make sure that your software is not hacked in any kind of significant way? Well, to be very honest with you, pickings here are very thin. You're going to get attacked sooner or later. You are going to be at the end point of some kind of security exploit sooner or later. And also the framework that you're using, even though it may be just one framework, that is going to come under some kind of security vulnerability at some point in time. So the idea here is not really to fight security, not as a developer, not to go in the path of offensive security like many of our DevOps and IT network IT people do. Rather than that, it is a preventative measure and also implementing procedural security within your team to keep yourself safe. And this will take you to about 80% of what you can get from a cybersecurity professional in the market, really. And since most software, especially the software that is specialized to your organization, is quite small, and the framework it makes up a large part of the software. You could pretty much keep yourself safe by following a few procedural points in your development life cycles to ensure that your software gets a lot of the security updates free of charge and timely. This all starts. So the first stepping stone into a secure development cycle is to keep a framework logged and a logs of all the libraries that you're using. Um, all of these frameworks, these libraries, especially the good ones, they put out security updates and vulnerabilities periodically. But what I've seen is many teams are unaware that they're using a particular library, they're unaware they're using a particular version, and therefore these updates rarely make it onto the system. So, your framework log could be as simple as this. This is a kind of a mock-up of an Excel sheet where I have put one record in for Express. I have mentioned, what the current version is. I've mentioned what the requested version is, and that is the version that I'll be using in the project, and where this particular dependency is. Yeah. When you do this kind of thing and when you make a log, it becomes very, very clear to you the number of frameworks, the number of libraries that your team is using. And it's the first step into you being able to quantify what your exposure is, what your threat vectors are, and for your application and your team. It becomes very clear when you can see it right in front of your eyes, especially what's outdated and what's not. Because a common thing that almost all security checklists have is to update your frameworks periodically. Not just your frameworks, every piece of software that you use needs to be updated periodically. But this isn't done. This advice is pretty much given in almost all cybersecurity talks, technical, non-technical, even managerial talks. But I think because we're engineers and because we get lost, we are more attracted towards these technical concepts. We begin to let go of these procedural concepts. Once the talk is finished. And this is one of the reasons I brought this up front and center, because there's nothing you can do technically yourself that could beat this in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of ensuring the security of your system and making sure you keep hackers and all those kind of nasty things out. Work these updates into your sprint. If you are a large user of frameworks, updates need to be a sprint ticket, and you need to have one developer go around doing all these kinds of things. This is not done because a lot of teams, despite being security conscious, despite having exposure to security and its issues, they are very, very reluctant to touch systems in production. They don't want to update it, and for this reason, a large number of production systems, even today, are running on sometimes outdated libraries and have not applied security patches as needed. Now, this is probably the biggest pain point when it comes to procedural security within enterprises and businesses that are using JavaScript, or for that matter, any kind of framework. If you don't update it, it's going to have security depth in it, and this needs to be periodically handled. Most of the people get around to updating their software once either there's a rewrite, either there has been a vulnerability, or you need some kind of new functionality. Now, if you get to that before you are having a security problem, you're good to go. Yeah. But if you do get a security problem because some production systems, the security patches haven't been applied, that is a huge problem. You cannot solve this in situ. That is something that you're going to fail at if you try to solve this when the attack is actually happening. Updates aren't easy, backward compatibility will suffer. Either way, the attacker has won if you haven't done this. Yeah, he has created disruption in your company, he has created disruption in your system, at least for half an hour until you can, do some kind of updates. But nonetheless, the hackers won here. So updating your systems is not a very difficult thing. It's quite easy. Especially in JavaScript, in our ecosystem, many of us use the npm node package manager. It's just a matter of npm update on almost all the systems that you're using from your root project folder. Doing this periodically, I would suggest every quarter, will make sure that you are not troubled with cybersecurity issues for the large part. Just changing the slides up here. Another thing that you should do with these JavaScript frameworks, and for that matter, any framework in general, would be to evaluate the framework before you use it. Usually, what happens is software development starts off without a design, and people pick frameworks and other libraries depending on their comfort level. This is absolutely great. That's what these frameworks and libraries are there for, to get you up and running as quickly as possible. But once you've got your initial POC done, or you've sealed out the requirements for these kinds of things, you should definitely go ahead and evaluate whether you really need this framework or library in your software. Because for a large part, you don't really need this. You could have done this with vanilla JS. Yeah. So in order to evaluate a library, there are a couple of things that you can do. First of all, you can check how many maintainers there are in that library, and you can get the information and the number of maintainers using the command that I have put on this slide here. So npm view the framework or library name uh, that you um, that you're interested in, and you can type in maintenance as the command for that, and you will get an output like you see in this gray square here. So as a rule of thumb, two maintainers is a very good library. One maintainer, uh, it can be good, but the problem with npm packages, frameworks, and libraries that have only one maintainer, they have a large probability of going up out of date. So if you go to npm and look at the single maintainer repos, many of them have not been updated in quite some while, and that's expected. There's just so much that a one person can do. Express is a pretty large project, and they have four maintainers. That's pretty good. You might see some of the larger projects going up to about, say, five, six maintainers. Very rarely more than that. If there are more maintainers than that, then you could pretty much want to think, how is the leadership of this particular project going, and how much risk that brings into you. But uh, as far as considering your development goes, the more maintainers there are, the more secure the library is. As a rule of thumb, yeah, as a rule of thumb, the more secure the library is, and you can put that in as a secure thing that you can use. So as I said, one of the problems with having a single maintainer is that libraries go out of date. It just doesn't have to be a single maintainer repo. Almost all frameworks and all libraries can go out of date. So one way you can check this on JavaScript frameworks or anything given out by npm.
I think we have a connection problem with Sadat. Please bear with us. Can I will just connect him? I think you had a connection issue, right?
That's correct. I just got kicked out of here, but I'm back now.
Okay, so if you can share your screen and I can just get you back again.
Yeah. So I think it's this one.
Let me check. Yeah. No, it's okay.
Okay, so let me get back to where I was. Yeah.
Yeah. You're
Okay.
here, right? Okay, you can take it.
Sorry about that, guys. Got kicked out of the meeting for a bit. But this is where I left off, and that is basically checking the age of your frameworks before you use them. The best frameworks would be modified within the week. If they are more than, if they have not received updates, depending on the framework for over a year, that is something that you need to see as red flag and see whether you really need that functionality within your project. Also, the packages they're already using. As I said, you already have a log for all the frameworks and libraries that you're using. You want to periodically check, which are outdated, and you want to update them. And this command will help you to do that. So if you type npm outdated production dev, depending on how your environment is configured, you get an output like you see in the gray box there. So what this particular utility does is it just does not give you an update on the direct dependencies that you have, but it also goes and sees the secondary and the tertiary dependencies that these libraries and frameworks have. And it'll give you an update of what is the current version for this and what is the version that you are using for this, and also the latest version. So sometimes you might not want to jump to the latest version, but if the current version is higher than the version that you're using, this is definitely an opportunity for you to update these kinds of services ASAP. Because you really don't want to leave updates to the last minute or until you have a vulnerability. Uh, Leaving this to the last minute or when you do have a vulnerability is probably the number one way that development teams get into problems, because as I said earlier, there is no fix when the vulnerability is in progress, right? You just got to sit it out, and depending on what your use case of your business is, it could be a fix, or you could find yourself in a meeting room wondering what to do because of backward compatibility or kinds of other things, debugging the project, things like that. So don't leave this to the last minute. Just this, just keeping your packages updated will deliver you a large chunk of the security that your system should ideally have. The rest of it, you could get professionals to look at it, but keeping yourself updated is the most important thing. Also, we do use packages. Usually, we go and install the packages that we need before we start development. And then while we do things and while the requirements of our software changes, we begin to, let go of packages or not have packages, not, completely change our selection of packages without removing the old packages out. Now, this is not a particular security vulnerability because you are not using these packages. There's very little way in that they can impact you. But this will definitely cloud up your framework log or your library log, all of these things that you don't use. Also, if you don't do periodic cleans up of this, it's very difficult for you to take decisions on what frameworks need to be there, what need to go, and what needs to be updated. Sometimes you're updating things that you're not using either. And also, since update might be done by people that are not familiar with the logic inside your code. So ideally, you'd like to have that flexibility where you don't need that specific developer. They just go ahead and update it, and all of this will just land as below. So one quick command that you can use if you're using the npm package manager is this dep check. So it'll give you a nice summary like this. Unused dependencies are listed down for you. You just need to remove them out. And this will clear up your framework logs or your library logs and give you a better picture of what you are actually using and what your threat surface area really is. So the next thing that I'd like to say here is to use out of all of these frameworks, they come up with a lot of stuff. So just put yourself in the shoe of a framework developer. Uh, as a framework developer, you want to address as many scenarios, as many case studies, and be included in as many teams as possible, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to make your software as general as you can. You're going to chuck in all kinds of functionality in there, and each new functionality that is added or changed is going to bring security vulnerabilities in. So the way you can insulate your project from this kind of thing is to only use what you need. So for example, you can cherry pick out components from npm packages. For example, many the microservices architecture is very popular these days. People are creating small microservices and composing all of that up to a larger system. So these kinds of microservices are also written in Express.js, but they really don't need features like inversion of control. Depend they may be, but most of them are very small to the point that these features have not much value for it. So this would be the IOC container, dependency injection, middleware, because these are all handled by different services or properly a layer of software that is outside the service. So you wouldn't really need all of this functionality inside your particular deployment. So you should cherry pick them out, and you can do that. You could get just the router, you could get just the IOC container if you need it, and use them in your project. And when you do this, security vulnerabilities that are applicable to other parts of this framework, they won't be applicable to you. So that kind of eases your concerns on security in the backend. Also, as I said, evaluate the features that you're really using. So this is probably the most profitable thing that you can do, and one thing that a lot of people kind of omit doing is to question, how much of these libraries they're going to use. Most of the software and packages, and you can see this on GitHub, the framework is far larger than the custom piece of software that it houses. In many cases, this is not a big problem because the framework provides the functionality we need. But in many cases, that shouldn't be the case. All of this stuff there is garbage. All of this stuff there can be infected with security vulnerabilities, and the fact that you're keeping it in there is just exposing the surface area from which somebody can attack you with. One simple way is just get rid of all of them. npm allows you to bring in packages. Express does. So do all the big frameworks like React and Angular and all of them. Cherry pick. Cherry pick the features that you need, and in that way, security vulnerabilities that affect the entire framework might not apply to you, and maybe at that particular time, there's nothing that you need to do. Yeah. And probably one of the last things I'd like to talk about frameworks is its defaults. Yeah. So defaults get you up and running with the framework very, very quickly. And many frameworks have come up with some very smart defaults, very sensible ones. But the fact that they are defaults by themselves makes them a vulnerability. They are like leaving a bit sticking out for an attacker to grab on, to find particular places, and also unattended defaults that are unattended to kind of give the attacker the impression that the person that is using this has not customized the system enough. So as a developer within a development team, one of the best things you can do is to override all your defaults. So, and when I say overwrite all your defaults, just overwrite them. If your timeout is 3000 seconds, make it 3001. Well, not 3001, maybe 3500. Yeah. Things like this. Because, these kinds of things allow attackers to predict what your system can do. Many of the exploits are built around default values and pathways created by these default values. So if you are leaving these defaults as they are without changing them, there's a high chance that an attacker can pretty much start to analyze your system. Even if you don't do any of the previous items, if you hide your defaults, if you change them, it has a way of throwing attackers off, on how they should approach your system. One good example is WordPress. So WordPress is open source software. It's a CMS system which has become very popular. It's a beautiful piece of software. Its popularity pretty much is a testament to how well they have built it. But it gets hacked quite often, and a large number of these exploits depend on the fact that you can actually find the administration screen. So the default admin screen here is WP admin, and that is the first thing that attackers really go for. This is apart from the plugin. So if you have not used any plugins, getting to this screen is one of the first ways that an attacker can use to analyze your system and to pretty much craft an attack on you. Even if you have been careless enough to use admin as your username and password, if your attacker cannot find the screen, he cannot attack you. So this is the moral of the story here. So all the paths inside your framework, if there are default ones, and every framework does have default path construction, change it. The time that you spend to do this particular customization is well worth the security risks that these kinds of things expose your software to. And overwriting the defaults also prevents an attacker from doing certain amount of guesswork. Attackers use, default timeouts, uh, default pathways, and default values to kind of craft their attack. So, best approach to do this would be to have a checklist. Every framework, at least many of the respectable ones, have a list of defaults that they provide with their system on first installation. You can get a copy of this from their documents, and once you have a hand at this, just replace all of them with some random numbers that suits your business. Even if you don't want to change it, just change it. And getting rid of these items will greatly contribute to your security by taking away the attacker's ability uh, to guess, what your system might do, and take your system away from its default execution. So, with that, we have, I think, my final recommendation to you on framework security. So, Um, frameworks provide a regular expression. That's something that many developments struggle with, regular expressions, which are used in validation. And many of the frameworks supply these libraries to test your inputs and outputs. One thing they don't check is the input length. And this is something that you need to handle as a developer. You see, regular expressions are very good at matching input and seeing whether they are within, a valid criteria, but they also have a weak point in that in order to match your statements, they start backtracking. So regular expression exploits where they give broken input, weirdly crafted ones into your regular expression. This could unpredictably cause your regular expression to backtrack, sometimes to backtrack infinitely. Um, and this will pretty much impact your service times. One of the most annoying things about these regular expression exploits is um, there is really no indication that an exploit is going on. Your system has just slowed down with no visible breakpoints, no visible logs to go by, uh, apart from, some dodgy strings that are coming in. So unless you're quick to catch that out of logs, regular expressions have a way of, degrading your system without really giving indication of what's going on. So one easy way for you to guard against this, is to always check the lengths of your inputs and make sure these inputs are within a particular length. So names, phone numbers, they all have standardized lengths. So your first thing, before you go to check whether this is actually a valid input, you would check the length of the input. So for a name, maybe you want the length to be majority of the first names and last names cap off at about 10, 15 letters, even at the worst case. And you really want to put these caps in place before you go to validate these kinds of inputs within your regular expression. If that way, you can very easily avoid, exploits on regular expressions, backtracking, and trying to crash the system that way. This is especially important if you're running a Node.js application. So Node.js applications are single threaded. If a regular expression on any request is taking too long, it's going to affect your entire system. So with this simple check in there, you could not only make use of your framework's regular expressions and their validations, pre-built validations for you, but you can also prevent people from abusing these regular expressions. The framework cannot do this for you. So, for example, a framework can't put caps on inputs because they want people to have a very smooth onboarding experience. So they're not going to do it. So you got to remember this and do this yourself, and that would make sure that the security put in place by your frameworks actually work for you. Okay. So thank you very much. So this is a short and condensed security overview on what small development teams working for startups or other, new businesses can use to procedurally put security in place when you're using JavaScript frameworks and, to a certain extent, almost any other framework. This is more important in JavaScript frameworks because not only is it very popular, not only is it very ubiquitous, but also auditing JavaScript frameworks, as you saw earlier, is not feasible. There is far too many of them coming far too quickly. And given that our industry rolls over on its belly every 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a brand new set of frameworks, a brand new set of libraries, but always the exploits are the same. So there have not been any new exploits, I think, in the last 10 years, apart from that, no SQL injection thing that has come along with no SQL databases. Um, but it's always going to be the same plan of exploits that is going to be plaguing your software. So there's very few ways that you can practice technically, because, as I said, you know earlier, the ball was on your side of the code. You can change the code the way you need it, and you know where to change it. But in when you're using frameworks, when you're using composable software, when you're entering the world of Node and NPM, these are not available to you. And to supplant these, I have specified a few things here in this presentation that have helped development teams keep their software safe and secure until they can get more expertise in, and do proper audits and things like that. So thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for the developer forum for giving me the opportunity to speak, and also to Capstars. It's absolutely great working with you guys so far. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Fikri.
Sorry about it. So from audience, I don't see any questions yet. I have like two questions for you. So while I'm watching, you mentioned about this NPM checking the vulnerabilities and the libraries like expired, right? So there are
Yes.
like two type of people working with front ends. Much some people will use npm. There's another set of people using yarn. So do you have any idea about to checking these things? Are you using yarn or do you have any?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Well, JavaScript is very rich, So we have NPM, which is the dominant player. We have Yarn, we have Power, and I think quite a few package managers that come in. I think Microsoft is also getting into the ring with their NuGet package manager as well. So all of this is there. And there are identical commands to this in almost all of these package managers. So you could go to the documentation and check out, how can I check for outdated packages, and you would get the specific command for your package manager. So starting with NuGet, Yarn almost certainly has these commands in their framework. Just check the documentation, and you should be able to get them.
Yeah, okay. The next one is like on the regular expression you mentioned. So what you meant by like make sure your regular expressions are okay. So like normally we write regular expression on text boxes to format these things, right? So
Yes.
like do you advise to not use them or like
No,
what
no.
is your suggestion on that one?
Certainly, regular expressions are very much necessary. It is the easiest way to validate many types of inputs like numbers, credit cards, so forth and so forth. And they're provided by many frameworks as well. So that's a good thing. So as you should continue to use them, one weak point in this regular expression is the length of the input. So
Yeah.
regular expressions are very sensitive to the length of the input. So for example, by just increasing the length of the input, you could crash the system if you haven't crafted your regular expression properly. Sometimes even if you have crafted your regular expression properly and you give a bad input, a regular expression is something that will try to force match whatever you send it. It'll backtrack until it exhausts almost all paths to try and match that particular input until it gives up. Yeah. So that's what it's going to do. So one very easy way for you to stop an attacker from giving you an extremely long string which will fox your regular expression is to cap it. So if you cap, say, you could cap a credit card to 16 digits or whatever it is, telephone numbers to 10, 11 digits right there. So that particular exploit is taken away. So the attacker's hands is tied, and your
Okay.
regular expressions will continue to work beautifully. Yeah.
Okay, so what if I like stop validating on my text box on the front end level, just check the length of it and do the validation on the back end. So do you recommend it?
Well, do I recommend it? No, I would not recommend it. I would always recommend validating your input at the first instance that you get. There's no point continuing with invalid input. So one thing that you can increase your security with is by validating everything on the front end, so that it stops any kind of bug progressing even one line of code into the system. So that you can buffer it up. Also, in many software projects, there are two teams, the backend team and the front end team. You always want to handle security vulnerabilities within your team. So
Yeah.
if you catch it at the front end, you don't want to depend on the backend guy or vice versa, because ultimately when this goes wrong, yeah, you're going to have a small audit on that. You're going to have a retrospective on that, and it's going to fall into your plate. So handle all validations and all security things on your source code. You should be good.
On the front end.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good answer. So what do you think about like sending data to front end to back end?
Yes.
Right. So do you
Yes.
have any ideas on that and any best practices you can just suggest? Okay, we have a
Well,
validation stuff from the front end. We validated it. Now, how do you going to send to the back end?
yes.
Whose responsibility
So
is it?
yes. Well, first of all, this it's a pretty open question, really, because sending data to the backend almost always depends on your particular use case and how you want to send it. If you are sending secure data, I always suggest sending it in the request body. So that is through a post. So that your HTTPS and that's layer of encryption will have will keep you covered. there is this new trend to send a JSON object as a path. A query parameter
Mm.
as a query parameter. Um, this has been frowned upon a little bit because it can be manipulated in some ways. So I would advise you to avoid doing that.
Mm.
But as far as transporting data to the backend, post and in the body is the safest way that you can go.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think Zahra, you can just yeah, take it home from here. Hi,
Sure.
Zahra. It's all for you.
Yeah. Super. So I think that you had a couple of questions there that you raised with Siddharth, and I think that that session went quite well. Doing the session as for the Sri Lanka Developer Forum and for representing Gapstars on this platform as well. So to the audience listening in, we do hope that you enjoyed the session. We do hope that you learned quite a bit as well. We do have quite a number of JavaScript positions as well as other positions in Java and in PHP Open as well. So if you are interested in joining Gapstars and building some amazing software with us, our link to the careers website is right down here in the banner. So if you are interested, do check it out, send us your CVs, and we'd love to have you on board. And of course, thank you again to Fikri for being such a good sport about collaborating with us and for taking care of everything on his end as well. So thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. We've been discussing this for the longest time together,
Yeah.
and thank you for your patience. So it's been great. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for all your understanding with organizing this session. Thanks for the seamless coordination as well. And of course, Sada, thanks for conducting such a brilliant session. I didn't really understand anything on mine because I unfortunately come from a tech background, but it was so eloquently put together, and I can appreciate that. So brilliant job, Sadat, and thank you so much, Fikri. And of
Thank you.
course, thank you to our audience for listening in. So with that, I think we shall sign out. If you are
Yes,
interested in
definitely.
do
So
check out
thank you,
our
guys.
events and follow us. We have a lot of other events coming up as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
guys. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.